mostly virtual. And you can't really talk about the history of AKBC without talking about Andrew McCullum, who is, I guess, the person who set up the first workshop in 2010, B, the person who really initiated the conference then in Amherst back then, but also happened to be the inventor of conditional random fields, for those people in the audience that still remember this, as well as Open Review. So if you ever use Open Review, Andrew is actually the guy behind that in many ways, which I think is quite remarkable. There are many, many other things about Andrew, but I guess for the purposes of this conference, relevant that, he basically initiated it. And part of the reason why I'm telling you about the history of AKBC is to tell you about, I guess, the name of the conference, Automated Knowledge-Based Constructions, which back in 2010 actually made a lot of obvious sense, in the sense that at the time, knowledge graphs, knowledge bases like DBpedia, Yago. It's a little longer ago, but that was a great knowledge base anyway. And the Google Knowledge Graph and all of these things sort of came up, and it was very much one of the topics you would discuss at your local sort of ACL conference. Then in 2019, when we turned this into a conference, there was actually a discussion around whether that name should still stick. And one reason why people might say, like, maybe it shouldn't is because I think there's a pretty narrow reading of the word knowledge base. In particular, I think when most people hear that, maybe in our field, they think about these knowledge graphs, right, where there is a entities as nodes and then relations between these entities as edges in that graph, and you do something with it. You extract them, you construct them, you use them, you do inference on them, which definitely is a big part of it, but I think it's worthwhile thinking about knowledge bases in a much broader sense. And I think today you can actually do this with the type of models that we're able to build. Like a knowledge base can be a knowledge graph, but it could well be a Wikipedia that you can automatically construct as well, right? And there's definitely interesting work in that space. Could just be a list of questions and answers, right? Or it could be a transformer pre-trained on a lot of data that you can query and edit and control, just in the way you can control a more traditional knowledge base. And I think with that in mind, the way that I think about AKBC is more just about the general question of how maybe humans and artificial agents should share and utilize and produce new knowledge together. And I think there's a lot of interesting questions in that space, including how they can automatically build knowledge graphs. And I think, without further ado, the program chairs have really put out a great program that touches in one way or another on this question. So I'm going to hand over to Onso to talk about the program.
Hi everyone, I'm Onso from UT Austin, also visiting at Google AI. I'm one of the program chair with Andreas here. Okay, so I'm going to briefly introduce the program for AKBC this year. Overall, we have main conference today and tomorrow, 10 invited speakers, 6 speakers will be here in person with us, and 4 virtual speakers, and 16 AKBC papers to be presented. A subset of papers selected as oral, and then there will be a virtual poster session today, and then in-person poster session tomorrow. So this is schedule. So we start with the oral presentations in the morning, and then afternoon we're going to have a virtual presentation today, as well as 3 invited talks. Tomorrow it's kind of similar. We're going to start with the in-person invited talk and then in-person poster session. And then afternoon we're going to have presentation session for paper, AKBC paper, which got Best Paper Award, and then the honorable mentions, as well as some invited talks. And in the next slides, I'm going to briefly introduce our invited speakers. And then the last day, we're going to have 3 workshops, all in Barbican here. And I really wanted to say something about the virtual poster session today. So there are people, so this is still, we are in kind of like half COVID impacted. So there are people who cannot make it in person. So we're gonna have a virtual poster session today at 2 p.m. on the Gather Town. So even people who are here should join and kind of interact with people who are there virtually. It's the plan, but other programs there will be a lot of in-person interactions. And for invited speakers, we're really trying to get people from both academia and industry, people who are like interested in building these knowledge bases that Sebastian was talking about, either inside the language model or more structured and more interpretable ones, and people who are actually using these knowledge bases for more domain-specific applications. So we're gonna, Partha here from Google will start talking about temporal and multilingual knowledge graphs. And then Jesse from NIH and Duke, we're gonna talk about how people are using this constructed knowledge in particular in pandemic response. And we're gonna have a virtual talk by Jason Eisner at Semantic Machine mostly these days, and then from Jordan from Microsoft, and then later Panjan Das from Google AI. So that's a program, invited talk program for today. And for tomorrow, we're gonna start off with Tom, who is sitting here at AI2, who's gonna talk about NLP for science. And Angeliki from DeepMind will be talking about like how to keep this kind of knowledge more up to date and in sync with the real world. In the afternoon, we're gonna have Stefan, who we're gonna talk about a little bit more application of knowledge, and then Daoe and how virtually presenting about different aspects of NLP problems. Okay, yeah, so those are kind of invited talk schedules. And we have 3 workshops coming up on Saturday. James was the workshop chair. He put up nice schedule, nice workshops plans. One we're gonna be on social aspects of knowledge-based construction. And then about like finance and economics knowledge graphs, and about like how are we going to get the annotations for focusing more on kind of supervision for building the knowledge bases. So local chair Fabio has put a lot of effort into securing this really nice venue, Barbican. It's one of the largest performing arts center in Europe, and it's really nice here. We were gonna have most of the main invited talks and program in the main conference here in Cinema 1. And then the lunch and coffee and all these things will be on the level 4. Yes. And then the poster session will be on level 3. And all 3 lunches will be catered on site. And lastly, we're going to have a social event at Brewdog tomorrow starting at 5:30. Yeah, I think that was all for the intro slides. Here are organizers and then area chairs. And then lastly, we would like to thank our sponsors, Amazon, Huawei, Google, Baidu, and Benevolent AI.